He is in the same country as one of his kids, but there's no plans to see old mate Harry, are there?
Exactly the way they are. That his son is a and they don't get along anymore, even though the dad is actually...
He is in the same country as one of his kids, but there are absolutely no plans to see old mate Harry. Things are exactly the way they are, because his son is who he is, and they simply do not get along anymore, even though the dad is actually the reigning monarch. Prince Harry had prepared himself for restrictions, institutional resistance, and another bruising battle with the royal establishment, but he was not prepared for the final sentence delivered by his legal team. Archie and Lilibet would never receive the full armed royal protection automatically surrounding senior working members of the monarchy. In one devastating moment, the father who had spent years fighting for safety realized that his children would remain outside the shield he once believed was their absolute birthright. Harry entered the meeting believing he could fight. He expected conditions, delays, or perhaps another complex appeal. Instead, the lawyers placed a summary down and explained that royal protection meant the state-coordinated security system reserved exclusively for senior working members carrying out official duties. Archie and Lilibet had titles and royal blood, but neither fact created automatic access to that system. The lead lawyer spoke carefully, and the conclusion was final. The children would never receive automatic full-time royal protection while living outside Britain and outside the Crown's working structure. Harry did not answer. He kept one hand pressed flat against the table as the file closed, and the determination in his face gave way to total disbelief. Harry finally asked a question he had carried for months, wondering if being grandchildren of the reigning monarch changed nothing. The answer came without cruelty, yet it cut deeply. Family position did not override security classification, and personal affection from King Charles could not replace the objective basis required for permanent armed protection. The lawyers then revealed what made the decision harder to accept. This was not a temporary refusal waiting for calmer relations. The current framework had been written so tightly that reversing would require a major change in royal duties, government policy, or the children's future status. Harry understood the ruling reached far beyond guards, vehicles, and secured entrances. The decision would shape where Archie and Lilibet could stay in Britain, which ceremonies they could join, and how freely they could build relationships with King Charles, Prince William, and their young cousins. A family bond now depended entirely on routes, risk assessments, and official approvals issued by people the children had never met. Harry rose to leave, but one lawyer stopped him with a recorded account from the security review. The recommendation had not begun in court. It had begun after a private incident tied to a planned family visit, an incident powerful enough to change the entire course of the case. Harry had just heard the final legal verdict, but to understand why it wounded him so deeply, one had to understand what protection meant to every person caught inside this family battle. To the officials handling the case, Archie and Lilibet were names inside a security classification. To Harry, they were two children who had inherited a royal identity, without inheriting the protection surrounding it. They carried titles linked to a king, yet their daily lives unfolded thousands of miles from the institution those titles represented. That contradiction had always troubled their father, and now, after the lawyer's final confirmation, it had become impossible for him to ignore. Harry returned home carrying a truth he did not know how to explain. Archie was old enough to understand that his family was connected to palaces, royal ceremonies, and a grandfather who was king. A royal ceremony is an official event tied to the crown, often surrounded by strict security and protocol. Yet the boy was still too young to understand why visiting that world required intense negotiations before a single journey could begin. Lilibet carried an even quieter connection. Her name honored the late queen. Linking her to a woman whose place in royal history was impossible to separate from the monarchy itself. But the little girl had experienced almost none of that life inside Britain. Harry knew the emotional bond existed, but he also knew the practical bond was weakening. Harry watched both children playing and felt the decision pressing against him. They laughed without knowing that their names carried expectations, attention, and risks their lives might never safely accommodate. He had fought to protect them from the pressures that shaped his own childhood, and now he feared distance from the palace had created a different kind of loss. Meghan noticed the silence before he said a single word. She asked what the lawyers had confirmed, and he struggled to repeat the sentence. Saying it aloud made the ruling feel completely permanent. When he finally explained that Archie and Lilibet would never receive automatic full royal protection, she did not interrupt him. Meghan sat opposite him as he described what every future visit could involve. Private guards would have to be paid, routes could be severely restricted, meetings could change at the last moment, and official support might depend entirely on a fresh risk assessment, meaning a new review of danger before each trip. Harry then admitted what he had never said clearly before. He had genuinely believed King Charles might eventually create an exception for his grandchildren, even if the government refused to change its position. The king, he thought, would find a way to bring family and institution together. Meghan answered with painful calm. She revealed through their private conversation that she had always feared the palace would preserve the children's titles while allowing their real connection to royal life to fade away entirely. Harry resisted that thought, but she had already reached a conclusion he was only beginning to face. Harry finally told her the decision had not started with lawyers. It could be traced directly to one failed visit, one security dispute, and one moment palace officials never publicly acknowledged but never forgot. The legal verdict had landed in California, but the chain of events that produced it began much earlier, behind a guarded entrance in Windsor. The final decision did not emerge from a single courtroom argument or one hostile palace meeting. It began with a visit that never happened. Months earlier, Harry had attempted to arrange a private Windsor reunion between his children and King Charles. What appeared to be a simple family request quickly became a security confrontation. By the time one palace gate closed and a convoy plan was withdrawn, the future of Archie and Lilibet's royal protection had already begun to harden. Harry had hoped the weekend would repair more than distance. He wanted Archie and Lilibet to spend quiet time with their grandfather away from public ceremonies and family tension. His team requested a protected airport transfer, access to the secured royal route, armed coordination throughout the visit, and accommodation inside the Windsor perimeter, the guarded area surrounding the royal residence. The final planning call changed everything. Palace security proposed that Harry's private guards hand operational control to the official team at the outer gate. Operational control meant deciding routes, movements, and emergency responses during the visit. But his guard would not receive full access to royal intelligence, and Harry immediately saw the danger in surrendering authority without receiving the information needed to protect his children. Harry refused, his voice hardening as officials repeated that intelligence could not be shared outside approved channels. He warned that no father should be asked to trust a system that would not explain the threats around his family. Then he ended the call and canceled the visit entirely. Charles received the news in a private room at Windsor. The king removed his glasses, placed the itinerary face down, and asked whether Archie and Lilibet had already been told they were coming. When the aide said the children may have known, he remained completely silent. He had waited for that reunion, and another institutional barrier had taken away. Harry saw proof of abandonment, while Charles saw a painful collision between rules and family. Neither man believed he had caused a failure, yet both carried the loss. William learned of the collapse through a documented security briefing. The prince questioned whether his brother's demands were only about safety, or whether Harry was also trying to regain the treatment given to working royals. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties for the crown and receives institutional support tied to those duties. Security officials recorded the dispute as evidence of competing chains of command. They warned that private guards and state officers following different instructions could increase danger rather than reduce it. That assessment later became the foundation for the legal conclusion that Archie and Lilibet could not be placed permanently inside a protection system built around official royal work. Harry then discovered that William's concerns had been preserved in the discussion record, and his grief changed instantly. This was no longer just a legal disagreement. The Windsor incident explained how the decision began, but it was William's involvement that transformed Harry's grief into anger. When Harry finally faced William, there were absolutely no cameras, advisors, or carefully prepared palace statements standing between them. There were only two brothers left in the room, one completely convinced his children had been abandoned by their own blood, and the other equally convinced that the British monarchy could never be forced to operate through emotional guilt. Years of deep-seated resentment entered the space with them, yet everyone could feel the specific argument was fundamentally different. It was no longer about public titles, media interviews, or old historical accusations. It was entirely about whether Archie and Lilibet truly belonged inside the royal shield. Harry had demanded the private meeting after learning that William's specific concerns appeared inside the Internal Security Review. An Internal Security Review is a formal, highly classified assessment used to examine active threats, protection needs, and command responsibility across the royal estate. The prince agreed to speak with his brother, but he drew one firm line immediately. Operational intelligence, meaning protected information about direct threats and security plans, would not be discussed simply because they shared the same royal blood. Harry placed the lawyer's summary directly between them on the table. He looked into his brother's eyes and asked whether William truly believed Archie and Lilibet deserved less protection because their parents had chosen to step away from official royal duties. His voice remained controlled, but the sharp accusation beneath it was unmistakable to everyone in the room. William chose every single word with extreme care. He stated firmly that the children were deeply loved by the entire family and that absolutely no one wished them any harm, but they simply could not be treated as working royals when protection was required, and then as private citizens whenever public responsibility became difficult. A working royal is someone who performs official duties for the crown and receives institutional support connected directly to those state duties. Harry stood up so quickly that the entire energy of the room changed with him. He loudly accused his brother of hiding cruel punishment behind sterile procedure, turning deep family pain into cold administrative language, and allowing two completely innocent children to carry the permanent cost of decisions they never made. William stayed seated, but the calm finally left his face as the tension broke. William then revealed to the documented review what the security officials had actually feared all along. Private guards, government officers, and palace teams could all easily receive completely different instructions during the exact same emergency. One command structure might order immediate movement, while another completely separate team demanded a total lockdown. That specific confusion, William argued, could create the very danger Harry was trying so desperately to prevent. Harry refused to accept that explanation as the whole truth behind the palace's resistance. William answered firmly that he had never once recommended denying protection to Archie and Lilibet. He had supported one clear institutional principle only: permanent royal coverage could not exist without permanent royal responsibility. Harry's burning anger suddenly weakened, replacing fury with a deep sorrow. He looked at his brother and asked whether William would ever accept these exact same conditions for George, Charlotte, or Louis. The sudden comparison struck incredibly hard because both men understood perfectly what was hidden inside it. The future king did not answer immediately, and his long silence wounded Harry more than any verbal argument ever could. Harry turned to leave the room, but William stopped him with one final, heavy truth. The decision had never belonged to him alone, nor did it rest solely with the king. It rested with an intricate network of lawyers, government officials, security authorities, and senior palace advisors, forming a system that even King Charles could not simply command by royal decree. Harry had confronted the brother he blamed for everything, only to discover that the real power sat far beyond both princes, and perhaps even entirely beyond the crown itself. Royal protection may appear to the public to follow blood, rank, and palace privilege, but internal machinery is far colder and more bureaucratic than anyone outside can imagine. Behind every single armed officer, secured travel route, and protected residence sits a rigid structure of government assessments, threat levels, operational responsibility, and public accountability. Harry had hoped a father's love could intervene where expensive lawyers had failed. But when King Charles examined the final recommendation on his desk, he encountered an unsettling truth. The monarch's personal wishes could not automatically rewrite the state system surrounding his grandchildren. Charles read the heavy document completely alone at his desk. The recommendation had been carefully shaped by legal advisors, government security officials, risk assessors, and royal household representatives, not by one simple palace order. A royal household representative is an official who helps manage the monarch's daily duties, staff, and institutional responsibilities. That distinction mattered immensely because no single voice, not even the king's, controlled every moving part of the decision. Charles reached the paragraph specifically naming Archie and Lilibet and stopped reading. He asked the aide standing beside him to leave the room, then read the exact same lines again. Full royal protection depended on public duties, permanent residence patterns, threat intelligence, command structures, and official work carried out directly for the state. Threat intelligence meant protected information about possible dangers, suspected attackers, and active security risks. His grandchildren simply did not fit that operational structure while living across the ocean. The king understood the logical argument as a sovereign, but Charles felt its profound cruelty as a grandfather. He knew rules existed to prevent personal emotion from controlling public resources, yet those same rules were now deciding how easily he could see Archie and Lilibet, where they could safely stay, and whether a simple family visit could happen without another major dispute. Camilla found him later in the evening with the file, still closed beneath his hand. The queen consort recognized a heavy silence immediately. She urged him not to promise Harry an intervention he could not legally deliver. Another promise followed by another institutional refusal, she warned, would not heal the fracture between father and son. It would only deepen it. Charles admitted quietly that he had considered asking the palace to support permanent coverage directly from the royal purse. Camilla listened patiently as he explained a hidden obstacle. Even royal approval and private funding could not replace an official operational basis, meaning a clear state reason for assigning government protection. The legal wording left almost no room for a personal exception. The king then considered paying for private arrangements whenever the children visited Britain, but advisors had already warned him that private guards could not enter official intelligence channels or exercise the same legal authority as state officers. Money could increase manpower, but it could not recreate the royal system Harry wanted. Charles began drafting a personal note to California. He wrote that Archie and Lilibet remained deeply loved, then paused before explaining what he could not change. The pen stayed in his hand for a long time. Any message combining deep affection with structural refusal would sound painfully close to rejection. The king finally set the pen down without signing it. While he hesitated, the decision was already reshaping plans in California. The king could not overturn a verdict, and Harry could not accept it, leaving Meghan to confront what the new reality demanded from their family. The first practical consequence of the final ruling did not unfold inside a high-profile courtroom or a grand palace office. It unfolded directly at home in California, where Meghan carefully examined proposed British family visit and began removing planned events one by one. A special chapel appearance quickly disappeared from the itinerary. A long-planned Windsor stay was completely crossed out, and a private meeting with King Charles remained deeply uncertain. Harry saw this as a forced retreat from their heritage, while she saw it as the only logical way to guarantee protection. As the legal verdict became an unyielding practical reality, the couple discovered that they agreed completely on the inherent danger surrounding their lives, but not on what should happen next to their children. Meghan studied the detailed itinerary in absolute silence. The planned visit would have allowed Archie and Lilibet to spend quiet, private time with their grandfather, while also attending a small, significant family ceremony. A royal ceremony is an official or family event connected to the crown, often controlled by strict rules, security plans, and massive public expectations. For Harry, the visit represented a vital, fading chance to preserve the children's place inside that historic world. However, the new reality changed every single movement. Without permanent royal protection, each journey will require separate risk assessments, privately arranged guards, highly restricted routes, and fresh, exhausting talks over which locations could receive official support. A risk assessment is a formal review of possible threats before travel or attendance. Nothing could be assumed anymore, and every single doorway could bring a different institutional rule. Meghan drew a firm, dark line through the Windsor overnight stay. She told Harry directly that she would never bring Archie and Lilibet into an unpredictable arrangement that could change between the airport, the palace gates, and the very rooms where they were expected to sleep. Her decision was perfectly calm, but there was absolutely no uncertainty inside it. Harry saw surrender. He argued passionately that canceling the visit would merely reward the institution for pushing them away. Meghan answered that proving a political point could never come before the children's physical safety. He accused her of giving up on their royal connection entirely. She replied that a connection built on fear, confusion, and constant negotiation was not a meaningful inheritance for any child. Meghan then revealed through a private conversation with their advisors that she had already ordered a strict new family policy. Archie and Lilibet would attend absolutely no major royal event unless every single security condition was confirmed in writing before they traveled. Harry understood exactly what that could mean for the future. Coronations, jubilees, state funerals, royal weddings, and other defining family moments might pass completely without them. The thought struck Harry harder than the cold legal language had. Harry had wanted to protect his children from intense royal pressure, not erase them entirely from royal memory. Meghan understood that deep fear, but she refused to let emotional guilt weaken the safety boundaries she had set. Archie entered the room before either parent could continue the intense discussion. He innocently asked whether they were still going to visit Grandpa in England. Harry opened his mouth to speak, but found he could not answer his son. Meghan gently said the plans were changing, and the boy left the room with no idea what had just broken between them. That innocent question completely silenced every argument. Harry no longer wanted another legal opinion, another detailed briefing, or another carefully worded palace message. For the first time, Harry no longer wanted another ruling. He wanted Charles to speak to him only as a grandfather. The sudden call between Harry and King Charles began without secretaries, legal representatives, or palace advisors listening in. There was no formal greeting and no attempt to disguise the immense strain between them. Harry spoke first, but not as a duke challenging a sovereign. He spoke as a father who genuinely feared his children were being pushed permanently beyond the family gates. For once, Charles did not answer with cold procedure. He listened intently, and what followed changed the emotional meaning of the entire battle. Harry had requested the private conversation after Meghan began withdrawing Archie and Lilibet from planned British engagements. A royal engagement is an official or family appearance connected to monarchy, usually arranged through palace staff and protected by strict security plans. Charles agreed to speak only if they left legal strategy, court arguments, and public statements completely outside the call. Harry told his father what Archie had just asked, wondering if he would still see his grandfather in England. Charles said nothing for a long time. The silence stretched heavily because the king understood that the question was not about state policy. It was about whether a young boy still had a place in his own family. Harry finally broke the silence himself. He said that Archie and Lilibet appeared royal enough to attract media attention, global headlines, and constant danger, but not royal enough to receive the protection that should come with that attention. His voice remained controlled, yet every single word carried years of deep frustration. Charles admitted openly that he could not promise the permanent system his son wanted. The monarch explained that automatic protection required official duties, state responsibility, and a permanent place inside the working structure of the crown, but he refused to accept that his grandchildren had been emotionally rejected. Archie and Lilibet, the king insisted, still belonged to him as family. The king then offered a personal arrangement. Future private visits would take place only at locations where existing royal security could be coordinated safely without pretending the children held official roles. Royal security meant the government-backed protection system responsible for guarding senior members performing duties for the state. Charles added one more vital promise. No family ceremony involving Archie or Lilibet would be announced before every single security detail had been fully agreed upon. That would prevent headlines, public expectation, or palace pressure from forcing Harry and Meghan into an unsafe compromise. Harry heard the structural difference immediately. He might never win permanent protection as an automatic right, but he could still secure carefully planned, safe access for each visit. It was not the complete victory he had demanded, yet it was the first offer built around the children rather than the institution. Charles lowered his voice before ending the call, asking Harry to tell Archie that his grandfather was still waiting to see him. The words broke through the layers of anger. Harry closed his eyes, and the fury he had carried for months finally gave way to deep sadness. A father and son had found the beginning of a quiet compromise, But outside that private call, the verdict was about to become a national spectacle. By sunrise, a private family wound had become a massive public argument about privilege, duty, exile, and childhood safety. Some saw the decision as the unavoidable consequence of Harry and Meghan leaving royal service. Others saw two young children carrying heavy royal titles without the safeguards expected to accompany them. The debate moved much faster than the palace could respond. Yet one image outside Buckingham Palace captured the national mood more clearly than headlines, experts, or carefully prepared statements ever could. British broadcasters opened the morning by asking whether royal protection belonged to a person by birth or followed the actual duties performed for state. Royal protection is a government-backed security system assigned according to threat, public role, and official responsibility. The question mattered immensely because Archie and Lilibet remained grandchildren of the king, yet they lived entirely outside the working structure that normally justified permanent coverage. Palace officials answered the media with silence wrapped in procedure. Their public statement avoided private security details and said only that such decisions were handled through established official processes. Harry heard cold language where he wanted human understanding, while the palace heard caution where the public saw a distance. Rain fell heavily outside Buckingham Palace as a small crowd gathered near the gates. One woman stepped forward carrying 2 bunches of white flowers. She placed them gently beside the iron barrier with cards bearing the names Archie and Lilibet. The moment spread across national broadcasts within minutes and became the exact image people remembered. A newspaper sharpened the anger further, its front page showing an empty, guarded vehicle beneath the bold headline Royal Names, No Royal Shield. The words turned a complex legal conclusion into a simple, devastating emotional accusation. Suddenly, the monarchy was not defending a system. It was being judged for what appeared to be the cold treatment of 2 innocent children. Harry watched the extensive coverage from California and felt incredibly exposed. He had described the fight as a father's fear, but commentators now debated wealth entitlement and whether private citizens should ever receive public protection. His pain had become public property. William followed the same reports and saw the institutional damage immediately. The prince still believed the operational reasoning was sound, but he fully understood that the legal language sounded completely ruthless. Commentators accused the monarchy of punishing Archie and Lilibet for choices made by their parents, and the future king knew that explanation alone would not erase that negative impression. Charles authorized a written palace response affirming that his bond with every grandchild remained deeply personal and valued. The king refused to promise automatic protection, but he would not allow silence to suggest emotional rejection. Meghan chose a completely different path. She declined to release an immediate statement, explaining privately to Harry that any emotional response would merely feed the public argument rather than protect Archie and Lilibet. He resisted at first, then understood completely. The world had delivered its judgment loudly, but the final verdict belonged to Harry, and it required him to choose between an old battle and his children's peace. Harry did not receive the outcome he had fought so long for. No permanent royal security structure was restored, no automatic entitlement was created, and no final intervention from King Charles overturned the lawyer's conclusion. Yet the deepest change came after the battle appeared completely lost. He stopped measuring Archie and Lilibet's belonging by the number of armed officers surrounding them. At last, the fathers separated their personal relationship with the family from the institution that could no longer promise them everything he once possessed. Harry accepted the heavy truth, without pretending it did not hurt. Archie and Lilibet would not receive permanent, automatic royal protection unless their lives and official roles changed completely in the future. Royal protection meant the government-backed security system connected to public duty, official responsibility, and assessed danger. Bloodline alone would never unlock it. Meghan helped turn that painful truth into a firm family rule. The children would enter Britain only after a complete, comprehensive security plan had been approved for that specific visit. Every route, residence, meeting, and emergency arrangement would need written confirmation before travel. No pressure from the palace, the press, or family emotion would ever change that boundary. Harry sat beside Meghan and lifted the legal file from the family table. He placed it inside a deep cabinet and closed the door firmly. The gesture was small, but the meaning was final. He told her he would not keep exposing Archie and Lilibet to an endless public fight over whether they deserve safety, status, or institutional recognition. Meghan agreed completely. She said the children could still know their grandfather, their cousins, and the history connected to their names without being raised as working representatives of the crown. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties for the monarchy and receives institutional support tied to that role. Archie and Lilibet would not carry that heavy burden. Charles moved forward with plans for private, carefully secured visits. The king could not place his grandchildren inside the full royal system, but he refused to remove them from his personal life. Harry understood the difference at last. William's position also became perfectly clear. The prince maintained that security must remain tied to active duty, public responsibility, and operational need rather than family emotion. He had not changed the rule, and he would not pretend sentiment could replace it. Harry finally recognized the true source of his devastation. He had not merely lost a legal battle. He had lost the ultimate hope of recreating his own royal childhood for his children. Archie and Lilibet would carry royal blood and royal titles, but their future would be shaped entirely by their parents, not the palace. The monarchy preserved its rules. Charles preserved a path to his grandchildren, and Harry preserved something far greater: their right to grow beyond the conflict surrounding their names. The royal shield would never fully close around Archie and Lilibet, but Harry's final decision ensured that the battle for it would no longer define their childhood.